All right, everyone, welcome in. We're about halfway home on this one with the game on Thursday night and then plenty of action toward the college football playoff. Tonight, of course, the two big ones, one in the snow, one in Morgantown, where it was typical football weather for this time of year in West Virginia. All right, Washington State, and, of course, West Virginia and Oklahoma, and anything you'd like to talk about concerning college football. This is MarkRogersTV, the voice of college football. We come your way really as much as we possibly can is the way we approach this to talk college football, discuss, debate, and analyze like nobody else. We appreciate you jumping on the live stream. Unfortunately, we weren't able to get out the notification too far ahead of time as was requested by a number of people. I was trying to gauge when these games were going to be over. And because of the situation in the games, I just sent out that notification just a few minutes ago. So hopefully we get a number of people jumping online. I hate to start these things too soon and start the rundown too early before a lot of people jump on. But we're glad to have you, and I'll strike up the live chat and see what you have. My quick take is with Oklahoma and West Virginia. We knew that the offenses would reign in this one, and they did. They were almost unstoppable. And it comes to mind a caller from earlier today over on SG1 Sports when we did our show this morning, College Football Coast to Coast, where a caller and I were kicking it around as to what the difference in a game like this would be. And it's knowing that neither defense is going to be strong, but if one of the defenses can get not just critical stops, but can turn defense into offense, can make a couple turnovers and then make them automatic points, immediate points. And that's what Oklahoma did twice against Will Grier. So just a couple plays decided this game as West Virginia almost came back. They had the opportunity after the long pass from Grier down the right sideline, and then the Petaway touchdown run to make it 59-56. They went for the onside kick, and even though they didn't get the onside kick, and that's a 20-25% play at best. It's more like a 12% play, I think, are the numbers on how many times a team recovers an onside kick. So the conventional thought is you kick it downfield and you pin them back, and then you get the punt back. But, of course, not a whole lot of confidence in either defense in this one. So Dana Holgorsen went for the gamble, calculated gamble. The ball wasn't cleanly caught by Hollywood Brown. He dropped it, and West Virginia had a shot at the onside kick, almost got it. And even then, they had a great play in the backfield on the option play by Drayvon Askew on Kennedy Brooks that forced the 4th and 5 play. So the game was on the line right there. West Virginia could have taken over at their 40-yard line with about a minute left to play and to be able to drive it down the field and score the game-winning touchdown, or at least kick the game-tying field goal. That didn't happen as Kyler Murray surveyed the field for about 3.5 minutes back there against a 3-man pass rush, and then found CeeDee Lamb for the play that broke West Virginia's backs and ended the game on the 4th and 5 conversion. So, again, Oklahoma couldn't stop West Virginia. The Mountaineers couldn't stop the Sooners on offense. That's what we expected. Let's see. The over-under was roughly 85, which by Vegas numbers is a crazy number, and it was exceeded by 20 points. 59-56, 105. No, 105, 115 in the books. Exceeded by 30 points. So, on the other game, Washington State, I picked the Huskies to win. I picked them to win outright. They were a 3.5-point underdog. And that game turned out to be, you can only conjecture on how much the elements hurt either team or just affected the game. There were a number of plays in the game in which somebody couldn't hold on to the ball, and that had a lot to do with the weather conditions. At the same time, it turned out to be the typical Apple Cup, a game in which Chris Peterson's club has dominated, their style of play and the quality of player at Washington is still a cut above Washington State, which seems kind of odd because Washington State came in at 10-1 and having defeated a few teams that Washington could not, and the Huskies were 8-3. But if you understand the recruiting and the quality of athlete that is now coming into the Washington program under Chris Peterson and their physicality compared to Washington State, this is what we get, and this is what we've got in the last few years, and this is what I expected, was that the Huskies were going to be too physical for Washington State, and that's what they did. They pushed them around up front. What has been a decent but not great Washington rush game throughout the season was able to push them guys, the Cougars, around, and Washington State is one of the best defenses in the Pac-12, and Myles Gaskin went off for a huge gain, had a number of big gainers in this one, a huge game for him, and Washington knocks Washington State out of the college football playoff, whatever chance they had, 10 or 15%, and the Huskies move on to the Pac-12 championship. And a season in which we thought Washington was the best team, they probably will turn out now to show that they are the best team in the Pac-12 after 3 losses early. All right, our numbers 860-325-3687, 860-325-3687. I'll, of course, take your calls, and if not, I will just tell you what I thought of today's games, and we'll set you up for tomorrow. Let's see who's on the line. Oh, you guys are talking it up already. Okay. Jeff Straley on the line. First and foremost, I think he was our first comment. Wow, that defense disgusted me, and I've been watching Ohio State all year. Yeah, that's what it was going to be. And that's what we got. I haven't seen the final numbers, but the halftime numbers pointed to a 1,300-yard total offense game out of both teams. Swampy McGee, Big 12 NFL orgy of points every minute of every sky sprayed day. ST section. State section. Okay. If WVU would have won, LSU would have made the playoffs. If West Virginia would have won, that would be with a W. LSU would have made the playoffs. I'm not following that. Sense of tumor. Oklahoma is still a very incomplete team. Yeah, absolutely they are. Can anyone in the Big 12 tackle? No, we've known that for quite some time. Nobody can tackle. Kyler Murray's speed is a cheat code. Bails Oklahoma out every time. And that's part of the game. That is part of the game. If you've got one of those special guys like him, there's not many, then it covers up a lot of issues. And this Oklahoma team, let's not think that they're just full of playmakers on the outside and Kyler Murray. The offensive line, yeah, the defense is garbage for the most part. They've got some players. They've got some guys that will play in the NFL on defense, but there's like 2 or 3 guys. Alabama has 10 or 11 guys. Even Ohio State, for as bad as they are defensively, 7 or 8 of those guys will sign NFL contracts. Michigan, NFL players on defense. Clemson, NFL players. Oklahoma always has a couple, but then they have guys that are just, they don't belong at that level, at that status for a championship contending team, and they get abused. It's also the style of play. You've got to understand the style of play determines that to a certain extent, all those points. Apple Cup was fun to watch with the weather, but the Big 12 defense is, yep. Lincoln Riley should be embarrassed. He should be embarrassed. Wow. I think I've seen that comment made more this season than other seasons that I can remember about how many people should be embarrassed. Man, there are a lot of successful people out there that should be embarrassed. Lincoln Riley should be embarrassed. I've seen that Urban Meyer many times should be embarrassed. This, I would think at this point, we're all walking around embarrassed all the time. I should be embarrassed. I would think you should be embarrassed unless maybe you're at the very top of your field. All sorts of embarrassment going out there. I think it's kind of tough to win these college football games. West Virginia is pretty good. They're pretty good. They're not great. They're pretty good. That quarterback, we knew it, Will Grier. He just played an exceptional game. He played at the kind of game he needed to play. Yeah, he was too loose with the football twice. And being too loose with the football a couple times normally wouldn't come back to bite a team as much as it did there. Usually when that happens, maybe there's a strip sack and a fumble, but the offense gets it back, or the defense recovers it, and it's a big change of possession, but they don't bring it back twice for touchdowns. So that's Will Grier's fault. But otherwise, passing the ball, what else can you say about the guy? He's exceptional. He's exceptional. Both we saw two of the, is it this easy? 3 quarterbacks in the nation playing tonight, or 2 of the top 4. Do we put Haskins in there? I'm not quite there with Dwayne Haskins being in the top 3 or 4. My list is Murray, Tagovailoa, Grier. Although, man, I would have to see Tagovailoa under this kind of duress that Will Grier faced tonight. I would like to see that, and we'll see it hopefully in the college football playoff, maybe in the SEC championship game, maybe tomorrow afternoon against Auburn and that defensive front. They have a top 5 defensive front, and as I outlined in my preview video, that is the one slim, minuscule chance that Auburn has is to create all sorts of havoc with the likes of Nick Coe and Derek Brown up front, Montavious Russell, Marlon Davidson. The committee should drop Oklahoma in ranking. Sense of tumor. Come on. I get your point. They're awful on defense, but they're not going to get dropped in ranking. They just won on the road against a top 12 team in the nation. So do we think that we would approach this any differently if instead of winning 59-56, they would have won 27-24? If all Oklahoma's wins went from being 55-48 and the like, the Oklahoma State game, the Texas Tech game, and they went from being these jokes of scores defensively, and you backed them off 20 points. Like they beat Texas Tech 52-46. Okay, if that's 32-26, they beat Oklahoma State 48-47. If that's 28-27, knock them down all 20 points. Do we think differently about this team? Do we think, oh, their offense is still really good? It's good. And the defense is pretty good too. So they're pretty good instead of, well, the offense might be the best in the country and the defense, though, is awful, so they don't belong in the playoff. Basketball on grass. I don't like to watch it either. So hear me out on that one. I don't like to watch those kind of games either when there's too many of them, and there's becoming too many of them. If we had balanced football where the defense was given a chance and where the offensive explosions weren't this prevalent, this frequent, and let's say your typical college football game was 24-21. That was your typical game, and 8 out of every 10 games was played in the 20s, and there was a good run of offense, plenty of scoring, but at the same time, teams had to earn a touchdown drive. They had to actually drive it down the field or hit on a beautiful pass play, or a running back had to make an amazing run, or a play had to be extremely well designed and executed to score points. And most games were 24-21, 27-24. And then 1 out of every 10 games, you had some crazy 55-51 game. And then 1 out of every 10 games, you had like a 10-7 game. And then 1 out of every 10 games, you had like a 10-7 game. And then 1 out of every 10 games, you had like a 10-7 game. And then 1 out of every 10 games, you had like a 10-7 game. And then 1 out of every 10 games, you had like a 10-7 game. And then 1 out of every 10 games, you had like a 10-7 game. And then 1 out of every 10 games, you had like a 10-7 game. And then 1 out of every 10 games, you had like a 10-7 game. And then 1 out of every 10 games, you had like a 10-7 game. And then 1 out of every 10 games, you had like a 10-7 game. And then 1 out of every 10 games, you had like a 10-7 game. And then 1 out of every 10 games, you had like a 10-7 game. And then 1 out of every 10 games, you had like a 10-7 game. And then 1 out of every 10 games, you had like a 10-7 game. And then 1 out of every I would enjoy that. I don't like to see that, what we saw tonight, too much, because it's just like, can somebody stop somebody? Can somebody not be running free in the secondary all by themselves? Too many blown coverages, too many blown tackles for me. When I see a backer, a wide receiver elude a tackler, I want to think it was because they were so good and it was such an amazing move, or they were so powerful to break that tackle, that I'm giving more credit to the back or wideout than I am to the tackler not wanting to tackle, not knowing how to tackle. The other thing that you see is not just poor tackling approach, is you see these guys like coming out of nowhere like missiles and just diving at guys, and they just slide right by them. You see that all the time. And I don't know why they don't. They taught us to break down. You break momentum when you get a guy in front of you. Break momentum when you're 2 or 3 yards, and you break down and you apply the tackle. These guys just fly right by them. And like 1 out of 10 times, they clip them and flip them up or hit them and knock them out. The other 9 out of 10 times, they fly right by them. That would drive me insane if I was on the coaching staff for any of these college football teams, especially a defensive coordinator, and my job was on the line, watching these guys constantly flailing and diving and going to the ground trying to make tackles. Number one ND fan. Yeah, I don't see anybody holding OU to less than 38. Would beat Michigan and Georgia rather easily. Would be in shootouts with top 3. Okay, you're telling me, ND, your handle's too long. I forget it. Number one ND fan. You're telling me that Oklahoma would not be challenged by Michigan or Georgia. Do you honestly believe that? Do you honestly believe that Michigan and Georgia would be just blown off the field by Oklahoma? Come on. I have seen that play out just way too many times, where it just looks like, oh, this team is just so good. They're so fast. They're so gifted. They're so talented. But then they get up against a defense that can lock down on the receivers. Not every play, but can push the pocket back into the quarterback's face, can actually play defense, will tackle, will gang tackle, won't stand around and watch one guy try to tackle, but they'll actually swarm to the football. And they're fundamentally sound. They don't blow coverages repeatedly. I don't think Michigan would be able to keep up with Oklahoma. Georgia would be dependent on which Fromm shows up. So, I just think we've seen this too many times. A ton of games come to mind when I think about, oh, this is the slow plodding team that plays defense and runs the ball, and they'll never be able to keep up with this team. Mark Rogers, remember Manti Te'o, make-believe girlfriend in South Bend in I don't know, Dennis. I don't know where you're going. We do have to remember that OU's in the Big 12. Football Fanatic 28. I just remember so many games like this one. The 2015 Cotton Bowl after the 2014 season. Baylor's a substantial favorite against Michigan State. Michigan State, oh, they're too slow. They play too much defense. They run the ball. They play action. They won't be able to keep up. The pace of the game's going to be too fast for them. Baylor's too talented. They've got too many weapons. How many times have we seen that play out? I don't know how many times I've run to my laptop to take Michigan State and 7 or 8 points against a Baylor in the Cotton Bowl and been like, I'll take that. Give it to me. Jeff, I thought West Virginia was going to pound the ball. That's what they did the first 2 drives. I would have liked to see them continue to run the ball. I think they were the better team. Were they the better team? Man, it's hard to tell, isn't it? They were at home. And I think those strip sack kind of plays are opportunistic for the defense, but they're not necessarily proving who executed better on that play. They're the kind of plays that explosive, opportunistic defenses make, but they can't be counted on a regular basis. Very few defenses throughout the history of either the NFL or college football we've been able to say, okay, the result of all these scores that they've made, like Alabama a couple of years ago, their defense scored in how many consecutive games? It was a crazy number, like 15 straight games. Then we can come to the conclusion that's a product of the talent of their defense and the tenacity and the approach that they take to the game. Oklahoma's not turning the ball over for 2 touchdowns with strip sacks on a regular basis. They did it. They did it. That was a great play on both Caleb Kelly and whomever it was the other time. Curtis Bolton was the player who picked it up and ran it back. But yeah, I would think I make this statement all the time when trying to compare teams and thinking that maybe one team played a better game from play to play, but the other team won the game. To your point, whoever that was about West Virginia maybe being better. To your point, I think if we took the game tape and we rated every play, we went through every play and said who won this play, West Virginia won more plays than Oklahoma. But Oklahoma made the enormous, huge, changing plays that we know. The strip sacks for the TDs, you're taking the ball out of their hands and you're converting them directly into points for you. It's a 14-point swing every time it happens, for the most part, in a game like this, when everybody's scoring almost every drive. All right. Drake's in the live chat. So is Buckeye State Sports. If Oklahoma wins the rematch versus Texas, I'd argue for them over any one-loss team. Why did Texas only beat Kansas by 7? Sam Ehlinger threw 2 interceptions. They don't have a dominant running game. It was one of those kind of games. It's cold out. They got a lead. Texas is one of those teams like a Michigan, like an LSU at times where you see they play conservatively if they have a lead. And they got out 21-0 quick. Not quick, not in the first quarter. It was only 7-0 at half. They had a great 98-yard drive, and then it was punt back and forth. Ehlinger again threw 2 picks, I believe 1 in each half. And Kansas could do nothing on offense until late in the game, and actually had a puncher's chance at the end of the game to do something. Johnny Bays, last time, and I can't believe no takers. Why isn't Notre Dame number 1? Will Hogerson go to Colorado? I don't think so. I would think it would be difficult to get players to Colorado. Maybe in a similar way that it would be difficult to get players to West Virginia, although you've got Pennsylvania and Ohio with football players, and Virginia right there. Colorado, you've got no football players around you. You've got to go to California, Texas. Colorado, of course, you get some players. You've got to grab the top 10 in the state, and then after that, you've got to go 1,000 to 1,500 miles to get players. So I don't know why Hogerson would go to Colorado unless they dumped money all over his head. Just dumped it in his yard. Oklahoma can stay in any game because of Kyler Murray, I guess. Oklahoma doesn't deserve anything with that defense. But see, Drake, if they're one of 4, 0, or 1-loss teams, they have to be in the playoff, especially if they avenge the 1 loss that they had. Mark, read my last comment. It was prediction for my Vols tomorrow. Okay. I'm looking for it. My official prediction: Tennessee 31, Vandy 30. Vols clinch bowl eligibility on a winning field goal to end the game. Hound Dog, I think everybody on this live chat was waiting for your Tennessee Vandy prediction. There it is. I'm surprised we don't strike up a live chat just for Tennessee Vandy talk. Just do that. 288028. Of course, this is the guy we should be listening to about OU and West Virginia tonight. Football has a lot of extremes in it. Our defense is poor, but the offense is playing at a historical level. We could discuss a legendary offense, but it's easier to just crush the defense. OU could beat Alabama, Notre Dame, and maybe Michigan, and that's if they score 60 plus points. So I think I get your point, Jay, is they're not beating those teams because they're not going to score 60 points. This is exactly why I said I do not want Mike Leach at Miami. He has never won or even appeared in a conference championship game. Yeah, Mike Leach. Look at his run at Texas Tech. And I guess I didn't quite realize how good a job he had done there in comparison to Cliff Kingsbury and Tommy Tuberville until I looked at the numbers this past off season when I ranked the Big 12 coaches, because he won 67% of his games and he finished in the top 25, I believe 5 of the last 6 seasons at Texas Tech. And that's just not happening ever since he left. So it's been a long time since Mike Leach was at Texas Tech, and he was regularly finishing ranked and finishing 8-4 with some seasons better than that. Then he goes to Washington State, and he gets that rolling after they've been awful forever. Since 2003, they've been awful. And now they're going to decent bowl games, winning 9 games. And yeah, he's got this problem. He's got Chris Peterson out recruiting him by a ton. And I don't know enough about the territory up there or the resources at the two programs. And then you've got Stanford and Oregon that factor into the situation. And I do know how much Oregon has and how much they've put into football and trying to win big with all the resources they have. So I know that Washington State's in a bit of a hole in terms of where they're located and the type of players that they need to bring in. And if you're going to look at the recruiting rankings indicating how much talent they have definitely developed that talent above the recruiting rankings. And Mike Leach has looked for his type of both offense and defensive players and offensive linemen that fit his system and can play in his system and move. And more teams have to find offensive linemen that can move. I think it was very interesting. Some of the more interesting sideline commentary and commentary in the booth concerning a little bit more in-depth analysis about players came about the couple offensive linemen, the one at Oklahoma and the one at West Virginia. And I got so many notes here. And, why do I do this to myself? Because half the time I don't even use it. Maybe I'll do an Oklahoma, West Virginia analysis recap. I could do Oklahoma, West Virginia, Virginia Tech, and Virginia. I said earlier in the day after we did our Texas recap on the Longhorns going to the Big 12 championship game that I was going to do analysis on Kansas personnel coming back for Les Miles and how good Kansas could be next year. Same thing with Nebraska and Scott Frost. Like to look at that. Okay, what am I missing? I'm tired of this Big 12 SEC talk. When will we judge football equally across the country? Buckeye State Sports, you would have to explain that to me. Michael, I'm thinking this season will be it for him as a Buckeye, talking about Urban Meyer. Are you on Twitter also? If you're talking to me, I am. I think you're talking to somebody else, though. I think somebody had a question in here for me. Hound Dog thinks Oklahoma West Virginia was the worst game of the college football season. Man, you sound like me, but you're even more of an old school guy than I am. I was okay with the game. Again, I don't want to see games like that all day. I don't want to see 59-56 all day. I was a little upset because I took West Virginia to win, and I thought they would win outright. And so they could have easily done that had they held on to the ball or had they made the 4th and 5 stop there at the end, but didn't happen. So that was one of my upset picks. And I also took Washington. So I believe that I went 6-2 against the spread, and I've got to make my picks for tomorrow. We'll get that done here soon. So I think I saw a few questions in here for me, but I missed them. I was not close on the score. I said 45-41 West Virginia. Does Purdue keep the bucket and punch their ticket for a bowl game against Indiana tomorrow? I've gone through this entire season ever since Purdue made it through those first few games and lost, and they looked a lot better after that. Once they played Mizzou and took the Tigers down to the last play of the game, I have considered them to be a better team than Indiana this year, but they both show up at this game at 5-6. And Indiana plays in the better division. So maybe they're not. Maybe it's that Ohio State game and us putting too much on Ohio State. And at that point, after they beat Michigan State, it looked like, okay, Purdue's not got a great record, but they're really good and they're coming on. And then they beat Iowa. So I would have said at that point that they were much better than Indiana, but maybe not. Not necessarily. They're both 5-6. Army is ranked 23rd, saying, hey, here's what's up. See, this is where I have an issue with the rankings, and especially when we mix the group of 5 versus the power 5. Iowa State 6-4. How good are they compared to Army, who's 9-2? Iowa State has played a Big 12 schedule that's pretty tough. They've beaten West Virginia, and they beat Oklahoma State, and they barely lost to Oklahoma and Texas. They played them well, and they lost to Iowa. They played an Iowa team out of conference versus a group of 5 schedule. So somebody had mentioned to me the other day when I was dissing Oklahoma for being taken to overtime by Army that Army was ranked. Yeah, they're ranked. Who have they beaten? They got a shot at 2 Power 5s, and they lost to Wake by 20, and they played a really good game against Oklahoma and took them to overtime. But all their wins, they beat a bunch of MAC type teams. So that's where I have an issue with the rankings, and that's where this is all screwed up between the Power 5 and the Group of 5, and trying to rank Group of 5s against Power 5s. And I even wrestle with that in my top 25 that actually makes sense. And I believe it does make sense, but it's not perfect. It's not flawless, because to rate a Cincinnati when they were 7-0 against a bunch of Power 5s that are 5-2 and playing so much better teams, it's tough to do. Michael, hope you had a great Thanksgiving with your family on Thursday. Well, I will say I had an okay Thanksgiving. In my business, Michael, It's best. The best case scenario is for me to kind of split my holidays from a personal and professional standpoint, meaning that I've got to work some holidays, so I kind of pick and choose. And Thanksgiving over the past 15 years has not necessarily been a priority. Christmas Eve priority, New Year's Day priority, and so I have those off and fight to keep those. But other than that, I was at work yesterday. But happy Thanksgiving to everyone. It still remains one of my favorite holidays. Trumped by Christmas, certainly, but probably right in there after that. Dennis Wilson, is this guy on some kind of hard drugs thinking Notre Dame's number one? You guys are taking it to the Big 12 tonight. So we're all going to get back together this time tomorrow night, and I wonder what this landscape for the college football playoff and the championship games is going to look like. What's it going to look like? Well, we've got Clemson and Pitt playing, but are they both going to be undefeated, or is Clemson going to be undefeated? We've got Alabama and Georgia. Are they both going to be where they are right now without another blemish? Is it going to be Ohio State? Is it going to be Michigan taking on Northwestern? And is Northwestern going to show up at 8-4 or 7-5? Well, I would think most likely 8-4 because they've got Illinois. The Big 12 championship is all settled. The Pac-12 championship is settled. So we've got Notre Dame going against USC. I would say out of the predictions that I saw in response to my video on USC and Notre Dame that 90-some% of you believe that Notre Dame's going to have a fairly easy time in this game. And a few people believe that USC has the talent that's going to show up that one time this year to pull off the upset. So that will open the door to the Big 12 or Ohio State if they win through, if Notre Dame loses to USC. I would think that's going to be the opener for one of these two conferences, whoever has the lesser of the resumes, which I would think would be Ohio State versus Oklahoma, but it's Oklahoma versus Michigan. Then Michigan's got the best resume, so they have the best entry into the playoffs. If they win out, then Oklahoma's next, and then Ohio State's last out of the Big 10 and the Big 12. So how many teams are still alive for a playoff? So Washington State gone, Pac-12 history. So for the second straight season, the Pac-12 has basically made itself irrelevant, and they can thank their non-conference failings for that. Washington losing to Auburn and basically just losing every meaningful game outside of the conference. USC losing to Texas. Stanford losing to Notre Dame. Oregon and Washington State not playing anyone. So the Pac-12's out. The Big 12 has Oklahoma. We've got Michigan, Ohio State. We've got Clemson. We've got Notre Dame, Alabama, Georgia. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, UCF, 8. Man, that sounds like a playoff. We got 8 teams. Those are the 8 teams that are fighting for 4 spots. 2, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah. And only 2 of those teams are going to play. There's only 2 situations, 2 games in which those teams play each other: Alabama, Georgia, Ohio State, Michigan. So we could have 6 worthy teams with resumes that are just as good as the teams that get selected that get left out. If we don't have chaos, we're still going to have 6 teams that can say, look at my resume, I deserve to be in the playoff. Whether that's Oklahoma or UCF, even if Notre Dame loses a game, and I will not believe that they should be selected because they don't play in a conference, but they could say, we have a tougher schedule than a lot of teams, and we only lost one game. Yeah, UCF without is done with Milton gone. Do we believe that they're? What do you mean they're done? Okay, Richard, I know what you're talking about. That they're done. Like nobody can envision them competing with a top elite team, but they only have a conference championship game to play, and I think they're capable of winning that game. So they're going to finish 13-0. So they're not done. Now the committee may, behind closed doors, consider them done and not consider them. Updates on Mackenzie Milton. Well, I guess he had surgery, is what I heard. I haven't seen anything on Mackenzie Milton. Been watching football all day. All right. Mackenzie Milton. Let's see what Google comes up with. I don't have any kind of pipeline to UCF. Okay, this was 45 minutes ago from the Orlando Sentinel. UCF quarterback Mackenzie Milton suffered a gruesome injury during the second quarter of the Knights game Friday. Okay, during the fourth drive of the game, scrambled to the right, et cetera, et cetera. We know that happened. Came over to form a semicircle. We know all that. I want to know medical reports. Transported to a Tampa hospital about 2 miles away from the stadium. Milton had emergency surgery Friday night to repair a serious knee injury, multiple sources. I haven't seen the injury. My immediate concern is for his well-being. I told him I loved him. That comes from Josh Heupel. No, that says 45 minutes ago that was reported. That's only 45 minutes ago that was reported that he had major surgery, and we knew that. So we're not going to hear anything specific about. I'm sure this. I would think that the surgery is going to be successful, but not successful necessarily from a football sense of 2018 playing status. They're not going to know that for a while. Either they're going to know that there's no way he comes back, or they're going to know that he has a chance to rehab it, but they're not going to know for sure whether he's going to be able to play for sure. So they may know no for sure, but they're not going to know yes for sure. So out of the 8 teams we listed, Georgia, Alabama, Clemson, Michigan, Ohio State, UCF, Notre Dame, Oklahoma, those are the 8 teams that still have a chance to get into the playoff. What is the most likely chaos? So let's say the most likely situation, the Vegas line prediction would be Alabama beats Georgia, Clemson wins, Michigan beats Ohio State, and then beats Northwestern. Oklahoma wins over Texas. UCF wins. Notre Dame wins. Everybody wins that's a favorite. And Alabama goes to the playoff. Clemson goes. Notre Dame goes. And then there's a decision between Michigan and Oklahoma. That's chalk. That's expected. So I'll ask you in the chat to if there is one odd scenario that could happen, what is the one scenario that you believe could happen, the one outcome of a game either tomorrow or next weekend that will be a surprise? Whether that's Georgia beats Alabama, Pitt beats Clemson, Northwestern beats the Ohio State-Michigan winner, or even Ohio State beats Michigan, because Michigan's a pretty substantial favorite. I know it's only 4 points according to Vegas, but I would say 90% of the population believes, outside of Buckeye Nation, believes that Michigan's going to win the game. Or Oklahoma loses to Texas again. UCF loses to Memphis. Notre Dame loses to USC. What is the most likely outcome tomorrow or next weekend that is going to upset the current situation? The biggest chaos would be if Georgia Tech beat Georgia tomorrow, then Georgia beat Bama in the SEC title game. Okay, that wasn't necessarily my question, but I'll take that. The biggest chaos is Northwestern. Okay, you're talking about one situation, one game. I got it. James Scott, I'm with you. Georgia beats Alabama. Northwestern wins the Big Ten, eliminates them from the college football playoff. One loss, Notre Dame is the 4 seed and UCF the 5 seed. In a hypothetical scenario, Texas beats Oklahoma in the Big 12 title. All right, number one, ND fan. I'm trying to follow this. So Notre Dame loses to USC and still makes the playoff as a 4 seed because Oklahoma's out, UCF's out. So wait a minute. Bama's in, Clemson's in, Michigan's in, and Notre Dame's in with one loss. Any thoughts on Boise State? I really want to see Boise State play tomorrow night. That's one thought, is that I'm usually here with you guys until like 1:30 in the morning, and I really want to see Boise State play tomorrow night. Of course, we're going to wrap up the big games in prime time, but that's my only thought about Boise State. I've seen them play the last 2 weeks, but I don't have any real thoughts about Boise State being any different than what they've been in the past. That's a typical Boise State team that we're seeing play right now. It's not a vintage Boise State team. It's not a bad Boise State team, and their bad is 9-4. It's a good Boise State team that's one of the 25 best teams in the country. But I really want to take in Utah State and Boise State. I have a soft spot in my heart for Utah State and Matt Wells, who was the first coach. I am guessing that nobody here on the live chat right now was around for this, but Matt Wells at Utah State was the first coach I was able to get on to Mark Rogers TV, and he was on 3 times, and he was a great guest. So I've got a soft spot in my heart for Matt Wells to come on a little internet show when I had like 50 subscribers, and it's still a little internet show, but it was really nothing at the time. And once he was on once and realized it was going to be a decent football discussion, he came on again and again and again. And that was nice. So, yeah, Utah State and Boise State, you guys know I don't get a chance to see a ton of Group of 5 football because all of us can only watch so much football. And I'm at a point in my life where my kids are grown, and because of my relationship status, where I'm watching more football than I ever have. And that's kind of nice. But it's devoted to the Power 5. And when I think I'm going to really soak up some Group of 5 football on a Thursday or Friday night, then we get on here and we talk for 2 or 3 hours, and I miss the game. And then I don't want to go back at 3:00 in the morning and sit and watch Utah State and San Diego State. So I really want to take in that game, and I see more Group of 5 football actually in the postseason since I've been doing this. Now, way back when, I used to watch quite a bit on a Thursday night or a Friday night or Saturday night, late night, when I wasn't sitting there taking notes on 18 teams, trying to produce videos and send out emails to 42 different people and do all the things that I'm doing for this, when I used to just sit and watch football for the enjoyment of it in between careers. Then I watch more Group of 5. But the last few years, several years since I've been doing this, I'm locked in on the Power 5. Then once we get to postseason play and I'm watching bowl games, then I get to see the Group of 5 teams for that one game against another Group of 5. Or what I really like to see is them play a Power 5. Congrats on 6,000, Mark, on the way to 12,000 and beyond. Thank you. Football Fanatic 28, I appreciate it. Thank you. Michael, I appreciate it. I actually counted that as 7,000, and here's why. And I posted this on Facebook, is because I just passed 6,000 here, and I've got about 680 on my Miami channel, and I've got about 240 on the USC channel, and about 60 some on the Ohio State channel. And if you add them all up, it's like 7,050. So the family of networks is over 7,000. Johnny Bays, why are you talking like this? I don't know who you're talking to. Okay. Get ready for parity tomorrow and championship week. The college football top six will look nothing like it does right now. Okay. Hound Dog, explain. Is that a Texas win? Is that a Northwestern win? Is that a Pitt win? Is that a USC win? So those are the four real upsets. Texas, Oklahoma, not so much, but we all expect Oklahoma to avenge their loss and win that game. Most people do. Most people do, not everyone. I picked Texas to win the Big 12 in the offseason. That was my preseason prediction. So I might stay loyal to that when I predict the game, maybe. But out of those four upsets, Texas, Oklahoma, Pitt, Clemson, USC, Notre Dame, Northwestern, Michigan, Georgia, Alabama would be an upset, but Georgia is still a elite program. So when I think parity, I think about those lesser teams, those 4 and 5 loss teams like Pitt and USC and Northwestern winning. If those four, if we get two of those, that would be chaos. That would be fun. If, let's say, Pitt beat Clemson and Northwestern beat Michigan, or Texas beat Oklahoma and USC beat Notre Dame. If we got two of those four, then I'm guessing that's what you're looking for, Hound Dog. That's what you're expecting. If Georgia Tech wins tomorrow, Auburn wins tomorrow, USC wins tomorrow, Ohio State wins tomorrow, then loses to Northwestern, and Oklahoma loses next week. Yeah, that would be crazy. Let's try to work our way through that one. That means Georgia and Alabama both have 2 losses, and they're playing in the SEC championship game. Notre Dame has a loss. The Big Ten's completely gone. Oklahoma loses. They have 2 losses. So Clemson's in. Notre Dame's in. The winner of the Georgia-Alabama game's in. Yeah, we'd have to really dissect that one. Haskins versus Patterson at Ohio State. How is Michigan favored? Slow boat sailing. 538 says Michigan has a lower chance of making the playoff if it wins out than number 6 OU winning out. How does that work? You got me. Henry, can't pronounce your last name. Dacres? Henry, welcome to Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. We hope you found a home here for college football coverage, discussion, debate, analysis. Memphis going to railroad UCF because it was close in the regular season. Without Milton, Lord help them. I guess if Auburn wins the Iron Bowl, then Georgia Tech wins tomorrow, then Georgia beats Bama. That would be hectic. Michael, I think Northwestern would be favored over Ohio State in a 3 to 7 point underdog against Michigan. Okay, Michael. Ohio State would not be an underdog against Northwestern. Believe me, they would not. I'm guessing that Michigan would be a depending on how they play against Ohio State, but let's say they win a touchdown to 10-point win, something pretty substantial, but not an annihilation, just a solid win. That Michigan is going to be a 10-point favorite against Northwestern, and Ohio State is going to be a 6 or 7-point favorite against Northwestern. Those would be my guesses. Uh, 28, 80, 28. My numbers may be a bit off, but going into tomorrow, there are 6 teams in the Power 5 with 3 wins or less. There are 25 teams with 5 to 6 wins. Is this the norm, or do you see more parity in college football? Do I see more parity? I would say that if we look at the standings, the win distribution is pretty standard. More parity. I don't see this as being any different than most seasons. I guess having 2 teams like a Pitt and a Northwestern with 7-5 or 8-4 records in conference championship games is 1 or 2 more than we typically have. But if we look at the Power 5, I'd say the ACC not having a clear number 2 and number 3 like they have in the past when it was Clemson, Florida State, or Florida State, Clemson, becomes a bit cluttered. After Clemson, how do you rate and rank and seed the rest of the ACC? There's a lot of parity there between Syracuse, NC State, Boston College, Pitt, Georgia Tech, Virginia Tech. Well, not so much Virginia Tech, Virginia. Well, Virginia Tech's 4-4 in the conference. Duke. Between all those teams I just mentioned, plus Miami, there are 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 teams in the ACC that either have 3, 4, or 5 losses. Yes, there's more parity in college football. I can't necessarily say that compared to 5 years ago or 20 years ago or 25 years ago. I think if we went through the top 25 and looked at the rankings and the records, I think we see a few teams that creep into it like we did this past week or two with 7-4 and 6-4 records more than we would have 10 years ago, which speaks to more teams in the middle of the pack or the slightly higher than mid-tier beating up on each other. I think that's pretty fair. It's very rare, if ever, that there's a final regular season top 25 that has a 7-5 team. Usually 8-4 is the cutoff. Go to any year, go to the last regular season ranking, not post bowl games, but the last regular season ranking, and you'll see the last teams, unless they're a group of 5 team that's 10-2 or 11-1, the last bunch of teams are 8-4. And then there's actually some 8-4 teams that got left out. That's kind of the dividing line. We could go through the top 25 year after year after year, and 8-4 would be the dividing line of being ranked or not ranked. And there might be some 7-5 teams that get a chance with a bowl win to get into the final rankings at 8-5. I know that there's going to be, as opposed to previous years, 8-5 would not get you ranked in the final top 25. So for those teams that didn't make postseason play, and a couple played today, like Kansas and Nebraska, do you guys have any interest in me setting those teams up for 2019 with an early preview. And I just thought of it watching the Texas-Kansas game because of the Les Miles factor, and watching Puka Williams, a freshman, run all over Texas a week after he ran for 252 yards against Oklahoma, and thinking, I'm interested to see the personnel that Les Miles has coming back from this Kansas team that went 3-9, but they were much more competitive than they've been in years, and to see what kind of talent he has. Scott Frost, although he only has one recruiting class on the roster, and he was only able to pretty much rally that class together at the end after the football season last year, to see what kind of personnel he has coming back. And after Adrian Martinez at quarterback, how much productivity he has coming back from a very productive offense and a marginal defense. Do you guys have any interest in watching those videos? I don't want to produce those videos if they get 100 views. If they do better than that, then I would like to look into Kansas personnel and do a quick 2019 preview. The same thing with Nebraska. Let's see who else. Whoever loses the Indiana-Purdue game will not go to postseason play. Who else is a fairly important team that's not going to make the postseason? The loser of Arizona State is not going to make the postseason. UCLA is not going to. USC most likely after they lose to. That's one I should definitely look at, is USC going forward, because Clay Helton may not have a job. So USC may be looking for a coach. Rutgers, North Carolina. Thanks for the parody breakdown, Mark. Interesting stuff. Yeah, that was off the top of my head. And what I said, 28-80-28, is accurate, but I didn't go beyond that because I would have been somewhat speculating. But the things that I did state, I'm firm on. Football Fanatic is predicting a Coach of the Year award for Les Miles. Arizona State 6-5. Arizona's 5-6. My apologies, Football Fanatic. Thank you for correcting me. So Arizona State is going to a bowl game. Arizona has to win to go to a bowl game. Last year it was Arizona. No, never mind. They both went to bowl games. They both went 7-6. Mark, what is your take about Herm Edwards' first year at Arizona State? I was pretty impressed. So I saw Arizona State play San Diego State. They lost that game the week after that upset win at home against Michigan State. And this has a chance of working. There is not one way to approach a football organization or any organization, and apparently this can work. So my expectation for Herm Edwards at Arizona State is like it would be for any capable football coach going into that program. It's not to win national championships. It's not even to win the Pac-12 championship on a regular basis. I would think if Herm Edwards stays at Arizona State for 7 or 8 years, that he should win generally 7 to 9 games a year. That would be my expectation of Herm Edwards. He should go 7-5, 8-4, 9-3, in that range almost every year. And a down year should be missing a bowl game barely, or going 6-6. And then maybe once or twice in that 7 or 8 years at Arizona State, once or twice, he should get to a Pac-12 championship game, with a chance then, of course, to get to a New Year's Six bowl, or maybe they're the Iowa of 2015, or they're the, give me another example. Man, that's the best one I can come up with. Wow, the Blue Bloods really do own college football, don't they? Because every time I come up with something, trying to come up with a mid-tier program that is challenged for a national championship, that has been in the running in mid to late November, and I'm not coming up with anyone besides Iowa in 2015. Even Mississippi State in 2014, they finished 10-3. So they didn't challenge for a national championship. Iowa went to the Big Ten championship game and came within a yard of going to the national playoff. So, wow. Yeah, the Blue Bloods do own college football, don't they? So my thought was that Herm Edwards, the bar should be to go between 7-5 and 9-3 almost every year, and then maybe as a breakthrough once in a while. That's what I would expect at those type of programs, at NC State, at Utah, at Arizona State, at what used to be Texas A&M. No longer, though. Not since Kevin Sumlin took over some Texas recruiting, and now Jimbo Fisher's making $1 zillion. But that's what I would expect at Iowa, Michigan State. Those were the expectations 10 years ago, but Michigan State's risen above that. Mark D'Antonio's to blame. So I thought he did rather well. I didn't see coaching gaps. I didn't see clock management, game management issues. There was one in the San Diego State game, and I can't recall what that was. Both teams botched that game near the end. I talked about it on here because I watched the end of that game, and both coaches did their best to give that away. So Herm Edwards will never be a clock management, game management expert. He will never excel in that role, much like Les Miles. That's not his forte. He needs somebody to help him with that. But I thought he did a great job, very good job at Arizona State. By all metrics, by all analysis that I read as I prepared myself for this season, you would think a team that went 7-5, lost the bowl game, finished 7-6, but brought back their starting quarterback, Manny Wilkins, and also brought back their best player, N'Keal Harry, would have been in good position in a down division to push for a championship. But all the metrics and all the analysis, pull out any FBS rankings, preseason rankings that listed all the teams, and Arizona State was lightly regarded, like 75th in the nation, and they played much better than that. So his roster is not considered to be that good, and they beat Utah, they beat Michigan State, and as you mentioned, they're 6-5 right now, so that means they are 4-4 in the Pac-12 and have a chance to finish 5-4 in the Pac-12. So it's a good year for Herm Edwards. Not outstanding, but good. Oh, this is going to be interesting. The final top 10 of 1995. Okay. I don't know what we're trying to prove here, but I like this. I like this kind of stuff. Number 1 was Nebraska, of course. So this is 95 when they beat Florida in the Fiesta Bowl. Florida finished number 2 after getting rocked by Nebraska 62-24. Tennessee at number 3. They beat Ohio State in the Citrus Bowl 20-14. Florida State 10-2 in 95. They beat Notre Dame in the Orange Bowl 31-26. I believe I remember my scores correctly. Colorado finished number 5 in 95. I don't remember who they played. 95 Colorado. Okay, the Buckeyes at 6, Kansas State at 7 in 95. Number 8 was Northwestern. That was the team that lost to USC in the Rose Bowl. Kansas finished number 9. Wait a minute. I think you made a mistake here, didn't you? Kansas State finished number 7 and Kansas finished number 9 in 1995. I don't believe that's right. I think one of those is supposed to be USC. USC won the Rose Bowl that year, 95. And then Virginia Tech finished number 10. That Virginia Tech team, I believe, beat Texas in the Sugar Bowl. So I don't know what you guys were talking about with 1995, but if anybody puts something in the live chat like that, I'm going to try to test myself to see if I can remember what happened that year. Number 1 ND fan, I'm multitasking. I meant to respond to Hound Dog about Tennessee belonging near the bottom of the SEC East. Duke is good now. Auburn needs to watch out for Pickens flip. Pickens flip. Oh, I gotcha. Flip. Savannah's in the live chat tonight. Savannah, it's good to see you. James is telling us that USC finished 12th that year. So they beat Notre Dame in the Rose Bowl, and they still finished 12th, and they beat them by 12 or 15 points. 46-34, 46-32. Dogs on top tomorrow, 42-10. Wow. Savannah, I think it's Miami. Mark Rick just dismissed our number one wide receiver, Jeff Thomas, from the program. Savannah says 42-10. Who goes to the playoff? One loss, OU, OSU, or Alabama? That's what's up. If the SEC championship game's close, probably Alabama. I'm a Texas fan. I want to know, what do you think the odds are of Texas beating Oklahoma again in the Big 12 title game? All right, Deep. Barrett? Well, if I go back to my preseason prediction of Texas winning the Big 12, then I'm going to bank on Texas winning. But of course, I didn't know what I know now about the two teams, so I've got to kind of wipe my slate clean and just think about the two teams and not try to rely on my prediction from the preseason. But I would not be surprised if Texas wins. Texas plays defense. So what was your question? What do they need to do? What are the odds? Well, Oklahoma's better than Texas, but not by much. Texas won the first game. I don't know how much you buy into. It's difficult to beat the same team twice. I think there's I think that's overplayed, but there's a small factor in that because the losing team has some level of motivation, although you would think the motivation would simply be, do you want to win a championship? But in terms of game adjustments, you have the adjustments to make more so than the winning team. But we had a 48-45 game. So even though there was a winner and a loser in terms of how well the game was played on both sides, it wasn't like it was 31-7 and that the team that lost by 24 points has all these adjustments to make. That game played out pretty much as you would expect it to play out. Texas, when they were winning that game, when they initially came back, so they got down early by 10 or 17, something in that range. And then they roared back and took a 2-touchdown lead. Their defense showed up and played Oklahoma better than any defense from about mid-second quarter to mid-fourth quarter. They played Oklahoma better than any defense has this year. Now, that's only half the game, but they showed that they have the speed and talent and physicality to at least make it difficult on that offensive line. That offensive line was being bragged about all night during that West Virginia game, and rightfully so. It's a very good offensive line. It's a dominant Big 12 offensive line. But if you put that offensive line in the Big 10 or the SEC, it's a good offensive line. It's not a bone-crushing, dominant, by far the best offensive line. So against Texas, it's mitigated. They're the one team that has the physical elite athletes, even though they haven't quite hit their stride. They're a little young on defense, but they do have the Chris Boyds of the world who bring the veteran presence that I like Texas's chances. They have a 30 to 40%. Those are the odds I'll give it. 30 to 40% chance of beating Oklahoma. Keep hearing McVay to USC. Why would he leave the Rams? Texas has the better defense and a good offense, too. Oklahoma has much more to lose. 45-24 in the fourth quarter, too, but it's the final few plays that got them back in the game. Oh, my 1995 top 10 post was to measure the parody comments against today from 23 years ago. So basically we had, as you mentioned there, James, there was several one-loss teams, about 4 or 5. Then there were a bunch of 2-loss teams, and there were no 3-loss teams in the top 10. It looked pretty similar to what we have now. But I would say beyond that, Now, if you get near the back end of the top 25, we could have some 8-5 teams when it's all said and done in the top 25. Northwestern's in the top 25 right now at 7-4. So was Mississippi State. All right, kids, I think we'll wrap it up right there. So I will be back many times tomorrow, probably after Ohio State, Michigan, and all the big noon games, Eastern time, Georgia, Georgia Tech, Florida, Florida State, and the like. And then at 3:30, why don't we just plan on that? After the noon games, I'll jump on about 3:15 or so. We'll get you set for the 3:40 kickoffs. Alabama, Auburn as the headliner. And then we'll get you set with the primetime games as we did tonight around 7:15 for the 8 o'clock kickoffs, including Clemson, South Carolina at 7, Louisville, Kentucky at 7, USC, Notre Dame at 8, and then we'll wrap it up tomorrow night. I may or may not, in the next few days, do a series on the teams that played their last regular season and last game of the season this past weekend, meaning most notably Kansas and Nebraska today, and their personnel losses and personnel outlook for 2019. I'll get that done at some point. But we're going to have a busy month ahead, busy 6 weeks with college football playoff selections, college football playoff talk that we'll be doing forever. And people will be pissed off about who got selected and didn't get selected, and probably me included. And then, of course, previewing all the bowl games. And then we've got National Signing Day, the early signing day, December 19th, I believe, is the date. So that really brings a whole lot to the table for us to discuss. I know a lot of you don't love recruiting, and I don't either, but it's huge. It is the most important day of the year in college football. And about 80% of the big classes were signed in the early signing period last year. All right, everyone, whether it's number one ND fan or Johnny or college football talk or football fanatic 28, Swampy McGee and the like, James, everybody there, we appreciate you jumping on board at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Enjoy the games tomorrow. We will see you at roughly 3:15 Eastern time, following Ohio State, Michigan, Georgia, Georgia Tech, Florida, Florida State, and all the big games at noon, including the Old Oak and Bucket, Indiana, and Purdue. We will see you soon.